And it is currently Thursday, January 5th, 2012, and this is Day 9 Daily number 396, where we learn to be a better gamer. I present to you the conclusion of Terran Week. In today's daily, we're going to do an extensive survey of Mech in Terran vs. Protoss. We did Thorzane's TvT on Tuesday, we did Bomber's TvZ on Wednesday, and today we're going to be looking at a wide variety of different styles, different concerns, problems, responses, counters, blah blah blah, all of that related to Mech. In fact, today's daily will be a first ever 4-part series because honestly there was just so much to say about the topic that I figured, why stop talking? Boom. Ordinarily, I do some announcements at the start of the show, like Fun Day Monday and the subscriber mono battle coming up on Sunday, but instead I'll just say, chat, ask each other about it, and I'll do the announcements at the end. I want to begin this wonderful Wubulous Daily by telling you a story of an alternate reality. Now this story, I want you to listen very carefully to the way it goes, because this relates exactly to the problems that people are having thinking about the matchup. Once upon a time, there was an alternate reality very similar to our own, yet for some reason in this alternate reality, people didn't really know that much about health or nutrition or exercise or any of that sort of jazz. They simply existed, and some were prettier than others. There was one man, though, who was the most beautiful man in the entire world. My God, men wanted to be him and girls wanted him. He was an absolutely stunning piece of person. I guess I shouldn't call him man. Let's give him a name. Let's just pick a name at random here. His name was Marcus DJ Wheat Graham. I mean, Marcus, seriously, like, if he lived in this world and I saw him, I would quiver like a 14-year-old watching Twilight, right? He was amazing. And he'd always grown up as the center of eyesight. People would just look at him, ooh, from the corner of their eye, oogle at him from afar. But one day he got a really unfun job that demanded long hours, and he could only eat fast food all the time, and it was just not as good for his beauty as he would like. And one day, many years later, he looked at himself in the mirror, and he was displeased at what he saw. He was no longer the beautiful man that he had once been. He looked haggard, there were big bags under his eyes. In general, he looked lumpy and frumpy and flabby. And he did not like this. He did not want this state to continue. And a friend recommended to him a mysterious shaman who knew the arts of becoming beautiful. This shaman is known as a personal trainer. Ah, yes. So DJ Wheat went to this personal trainer, and the personal trainer had all these incredible bits of knowledge about things like dieting, health, exercise, running, and informed Wheat, you gotta go to the gym, you gotta run, you gotta lift weights, you gotta eat healthy, and soon enough, you will be just as beautiful as you once were. So Marcus DJ Wheat Graham went to the gym, did everything that the personal trainer said, and came back and looked in the mirror again, and there was just not that much of a change. It's the same thing again the next day. And for many days in a row, Marcus DJ Wheat Graham saw no progress and went to his personal trainer and said, I am demotivated. I feel terrible. And what did the personal trainer say? Very normal. I want you to hop on this scale and I want you to weigh yourself. DJ Wheat says, what? A scale? This says how much you weigh. Marcus hopped on and he weighed 250 kremlons, which is a unit of weight in this alternate dimension. It's a pound. He weighed 250 kremlons, and Marcus didn't know if that was good or bad, but what the personal trainer said was that in 1 week, I want you to weigh yourself, and every week reweigh yourself, and the next week he comes back and he weighs 247 kremlons. No change at all. Terrible, right? And then the next week he goes, 243. Hey, that's actually starting to be something. And the next week, 239, and then 235, and then 230, and he had lost 20 kremlons, and he could see his progress. Day to day, he did not see whether or not he was more beautiful than the last, but over time, he was getting a sense that his weight was starting to plummet. So what did he do? He got remotivated, and he started to try to diet harder, to exercise even more, and started to tell all his friends of the amazing myths of weight loss, how to do it, and why it was so great. And eventually Marcus hit some serious roadblocks as he got down to 200 kremlons, losing an extra 5 pounds. I love the word kremlons. Losing 5 more kremlons seemed impossible, but the trainer said, you have to have even more discipline to shed off those last few pounds. And Marcus became devoted to that journey, to losing all that weight. And then what happened? He was talking to that same friend who recommended the personal trainer before and was saying how amazing everything was and how great it was all going. And his friend said, "That's so wonderful because things are going great for me too. I have met a beautiful woman and I think I'm falling in love with her." And Marcus said, "Really? A beautiful woman? How much does she weigh?" Now that was a really weird story. That was a fun story. Marcus, ding! Okay, so this is the story of a complete ridiculous scenario where the punchline really makes people go, "Wait, what?" Right? How much does she weigh? That's not something that you would ever say. That's like not only completely inappropriate, but has really nothing to do with beauty. I mean, sure, weight might correlate some to it. I mean, look at my cheeks, right? I could lose I could go to lose a few pounds and it wouldn't hurt me so much, right? However, weight is not the same thing as beauty. Notice the weird structure that happened in this story. Right at the start, we always talked about, oh, Marcus, he's a beautiful man, he thinks about beauty, and then he got obsessed with weight, this second order thing. It was, again, related, kind of, but it was not the exact same thing. If I wanted to actually say, hey, I want to look better, I shouldn't speak in the language of weight. I shouldn't say, oh, I can bench this much. Oh, I lost this many pounds. I should say things like, oh, hey, I fixed my chipped tooth. Oh, my acne, I've gotten it under control. Oh, I have these delicious washboard abs, which I do have. You just can't see them. It's off camera. Don't worry about it. Again, if I'm focused on beauty, I should speak in the language of that. And the reason I like this story is that punchline at the end, which sounds so off that it's actually funny, right? It's so ridiculous. But this is a problem that has sort of permeated into the StarCraft 2 space, and especially into StarCraft 1, where I would even say to people, oh yeah, I'm a competitive StarCraft 1 player. And they go, really? What's your APM? Well, it's about 310. And they go, whoa, unbelievable. Oh, you must be good. And I want to be like, my APM is not the same thing as my skill. And this topic relates to the way that people are discussing strategy nowadays. Because when I went to do this survey of Mech in Terran vs. Protoss, I didn't just sort through a bunch of replays. I looked at the ways in which people were discussing Mech all over the place, and thought about how it was different in the way that people were discussing standard strategies. For instance, in Mech, how do people normally discuss it in Terran vs. Protoss? Is it viable or not? Oh, it doesn't work because you can't put pressure on the opponent. It's too passive. It has problems with mobility. These are the sort of discussions people have. Whether it will work, period, or whether it will fail, period. However, if we think about something like Marine medevac tank versus Ling Baneling Mutalisk, which one's better? Well, it ends up being in pretty much every Terran vs. Zerg that you watch at the pro level nowadays, and it's not about which one's better, it's about how you end up doing it. The discussions about those standard strategies in forums are much more fleshed out and defined, but what happens when people step into Terran vs. Protoss space, into this mech idea, they'll say something like, yeah, it doesn't allow you to put pressure on your opponent. What does pressure mean? Right? That's an abstraction. That's kind of a step away from something specific. Oh, I'm trying to buy time. This is a strategy. I'm putting up defense to buy myself some time. That whole idea sounds fine, but buy time for what? For why? What does this mean? And what I want to try to do today in this Terran vs. Protoss survey is to examine the ideas that are going on and to speak about them in the language of StarCraft. Not in the language of this abstracted sort of shorthand. So for instance, oh yeah, this is a great build to put pressure on him. I really like putting pressure on him. Doesn't mean anything. Here's saying that in StarCraft language. This is an attack that will outright kill him if he early expands, but even if he doesn't, he's going to have to spend a lot of gas on sentries to force field. And I don't want him to have that much gas, so that's why I like this build. See how translating from this abstract to this more specific, doing something like, oh, this helps me buy time. Buy time for what? This helps me delay dying for another 40 seconds until I can get that medivac out. And then I'm going to be healed. And in Terran vs. Protoss, we're going to hear things like, oh, mobility. It's a huge issue. There's a problem with mobility. That is not StarCraft language. You need to say something like, if he moves out to hit this expansion, I can counterattack this one, and there's very little that he can do about it. And I end up killing more than he kills off. Now you're actually saying something. So to begin this whole survey of Mech, I want to say, most importantly, do not get lost up in these extraneous other numbers like, ooh, this is the number of bases you should have in this matchup. Or even things like, ooh, it's a low APM or high APM strategy. Ooh, you can't be aggressive or not. Because these are not real StarCraft ideas. These are shorthands that we've started to believe more than the underlying thing, just like Marcus DJ Weight Graham believed in weight as a number more than the underlying idea of beauty. Bringing it back around, we have Vile Illusion spawning at this top side with the sound enabled. Unbelievable. Unfrickin' believable. So good. And we're going to look at a basic mech game to start things off, where we will just note how powerful a mech play can be, and one of the reasons why I find it quite intriguing. As a general note, in any basic strategy, I like to think of it in terms of two basic components. One is the opening, and one is the core set of units. So for instance, the opening that Vile Illusion is going to do is he is going to go very fast Cloaked Banshee. He's going to build a bunker at the front for defense. Very simple opening. The core mixture that Vile Illusion is going to go for is a mech army with mainly Thors at first and eventually tanks. I've left out all the specifics like when he's building supply depots, when this command center plops down, when he moves out to take the third. I want to have these two basic pieces stated pretty clearly right off the bat. In this, in all the games of Mech that I saw, the opening turns out to be quite important. So I want to talk a little bit about the opening right now. Obviously, Vile Illusion is quite well defended with this bunker up on the high ground. And he's going for fast Cloak Banshee, which is pretty typical. Following it up with a fast Command Center, which is again pretty typical. But we see, interestingly, this barracks plop down with a reactor. Somewhat unusual. Or I guess I don't want to say unusual, but in terms of how I would think of an initial meching play, I probably wouldn't be going for fast Banshee and then a reactor barracks. If I saw this, I would think, oh yeah, he's probably going to transition into Marine Marauder. He's going to begin building Marines out of this barracks. This tech lab is going to go to a barracks and get stim. Cool. But interestingly, it doesn't. I'm just going to leave that as an interesting fact for now. We'll flesh out the opening a little bit harder in the next few replays that we watch. Now, immediately, one of the things that I want you to think about with Cloaked Banshees is Cloaked Banshees is one of the best containment strategies in this matchup. Look at the creature's vision. He may have this Stalker, but can he actually leave his base with the rest of these Stalkers? I mean, he has these Banshees floating in all over the place. Yeah, they end up giving him a little bit of trouble. Ends up losing a sentry. Has to pull back and reposition. It's quite annoying. In the meantime, Vile Illusion is comfortably building Marines 2 at a time, building this Thor, getting himself a Raven. He has a nice little mixture that's going to allow him to stay pretty well defended against almost whatever the creature could throw at him. But still, look at the creature's vision. Stalkers kind of have to be spread out, ready to deal with Banshees. He can't exactly take a third with that much ease, although I'm starting to think that perhaps it might be easier than I'm feeling. But how annoying with a Thor and a Raven that all this can get taken out. The Observer can be taken out. No problem at all. The Banshees come back, keep getting repaired. And still, we're not actually seeing that many factories. It's just this annoying Banshee harass, which, as it turns out, is quite effective. Still containing. All the Stalkers have to stay at home. Now, with that opening just sort of bluntly stated, I want to speed things up a little bit. A lot of gas geysers going down. Finally, we've stopped doing stuff with this barracks. We haven't really begun to build any tanks yet, but it seems like we're getting upgrades quite early. More and more and more harassment. The creature, our Protoss opponent, seems to be doing something pretty standard. Getting a lot of Immortals. Makes sense, right? I mean, we see a bunch of Thors. We see not that many Marines. I mean, still a decent number of Marines, but not a ton. We're getting our, plus upgrades. We're getting a third up. And at no point in time did it really feel like we could suddenly spring into action and kill off Vile Illusion. Part of the reason is because these Banshees are being so annoying. And moreover, they can just pull right back and defend. Notice that these two units, Thors and Ravens, work very, very well with Banshees. The Raven spots the Observer, the Thors kill it off, the Banshees continue to do a lot of damage and the army has to retreat. The creature's a little bit behind on food, blah, 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 blah. And as you'll note, it's not going quite so well for the creature. I think at this point, if anyone stepped in, most people would say that the Terran player is probably going to win. That is not the part that excites me so much. Obviously, this is going really wrong. This just sucks for Protoss. The army supply favors Vile Illusion, speeding things up. Just want to get to the end, to this one last final battle. This is what gets me really, really excited. Protoss does not have a small army. Terran has a little bit more. This planetary fortress isn't even done. But I'm going to come to the units lost tab. Yeah, I know it's huge. I know that that gap is really, 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 really large. But watch the way that the units lost hardly goes up for the blue player. And for the orange player, oh my gosh, murders this. And the creature gives a delightful FU. This was complete and total annihilation. This final phase is what got me so excited about the idea of Mech in the first place. Not the fact that it could win, but that in a lot of large direct engagements, it was bone-crushingly awful for the Protoss player. The Terran rolled over the opponent. Like, wrecked. It was not close in the slightest. And this is something that a lot of games of Goody have turned out to look like, where Goody will be actually messed with a lot more than Vile Illusion was. Vile Illusion did have the benefit of suffering absolutely no harassment at all, and then just sort of calmly trundled forward with a huge army and won an engagement. But a lot of games you'll see Goody, oh gosh, he's getting his expansions killed off, his armories get killed off when upgrades are at 85%, his pushes don't work, and then Goody just gets maxed, there's a final battle, and Goody crushes violently. Really, really, really violently. So again, this composition, a lot of tanks, some Thors, Blue Flame Hellions, and in particular these Banshees. Look how many kills they have. 9, 7, 6, nothing. But that's okay, his buddies have a ton of kills. Looked really, really good. That Raven even helped out quite a bit. So what have we done thus far in Part 1? In Part 1, what we've done is mention the idea that we do not want to get caught up in this vague language that is sort of a, it's not a fast track. What's another word for it? What was the word that I used before? Shortcut term. Like, we want to avoid as many shortcut terms as we can. Ooh, he's putting pressure on. Ooh. Even something, for instance, like the way I said, okay, notice the Banshees put up a really good containment. Containment is a little bit of a shortcut term. The best way to put it is, if those stalkers leave the creature's base, the Banshees walk in and smash the probe line. So it's very hard for those stalkers to leave the base. If the other units, like the Zealots and the Immortals and Sentries, leave the base to try to attack, while the stalkers stay home to defend, the Banshees can go over and kill those off too. I've eliminated the shortcut term of contain and instead stated what was going on in the language of StarCraft. And then we got really excited because we saw this huge, scary engagement where the Terrans seemed pretty much unscathed. What we're going to do in part number 2 is we're going to discuss a really solid opening, a straight up, incredibly solid opening, very, very easy to do actually. And we're going to introduce some tactics. Along the way, we're going to see some of the reasons that Protoss might have some good answers to this mech play. And then we're going to watch an epic game in the matchup. Sort of longer form game instead of a bone-crushing finish like this one. And, whoops. And then in part 3 and 4, we're going to look at big problems with mechs, and then we're going to look at some close games with mech in part 4. See you in 2 minutes with part number 2. 2 minutes in part number 2. See you for that.